show. We were listening to the latest My Voice, My Opinion. And speaking of My Voice, My Opinion, Sydney Walker has joined us. And I'd like to say hello to her, my colleague over at My Voice, My Opinion on Channel 8, where you can catch us at 9 on 8. And Carol Robinson, who created those shirts, who was one of the part of the creation process. We had the creator of those shirts from the last segment of the Commish Radio Show. We actually have the producer of the shirts, Miss Carol Robinson of We Are Uniforms. That being said, speaking of production and having everything happen, we have been so grateful that I'm going to let him, my dude, Smooth Solis, my dude, that's who I'm talking about. He has copied my style. The last time he was here, you had her.
Man, last time I was here, I had a lot of things. I learned a lot, and one thing was, if you look as good as Ed Gray, that might get you a couple votes. So I tried the hair thing out, but hey, it just ain't working for me. I was smooth with it, man.
You still smooth.
I'm smooth. I mean, that's my middle name.
Yeah.
But that being said,
tell them your whole name. You Smooth Solis to me.
That's right.
That's
yeah,
it.
Miguel Solis. I'm a school board member on the Dallas Public Schools School Board, and I'm running to be the next mayor of Dallas.
Okay. All right. Okay. School board member. Now you're running for mayor.
That's right.
Tell them about your family, and then let's go into why you gonna change from school board to mayor.
Great question. So to know a little bit about me and Commish, you know a little bit about this because you and I have had a relationship now for some time, and you're a historian as well. To know about me, you got to know where I come from, how I became the man that I am today, and that actually starts with my grandparents, who came from Mexico during the Mexican Revolution to America, to Texas, and to Port Arthur, Texas. Some people don't know what Port Arthur is. If you know UGK, or you know Jamal Charles, Kendrick Perkins, those people, that's where I'm from the Golden Triangle originally. But my grandparents came here for two different reasons. My grandmother was a refugee. Her father was the mayor of a town called Pueblos Jalisco, and in the Mexican Revolution, he was assassinated. So she came with her three sisters and their mother Nicolasa and ended up in Port Arthur. My grandfather came for economic opportunity. Sort of your traditional immigrant experience to coming from a different country to America. They met, fell in love, had 4 kids, including my dad. And when my dad, Esteban, was 2 years old, his dad, Luis, passed away. Because in Port Arthur, they make their money there through petrochemicals, through oil and refineries. And my grandfather was killed in an oil leak. So my grandmother, with a 4th grade education, speaking nothing but Spanish, now had 4 kids in what was still kind of a foreign land. Luckily, the community helped her, and they told her that if you got a good education, or if your kids could get a good education, anything in America was possible. So she told that to my dad, and when you got a little hope left, you cling on to a whole bunch of things. And education was one. So my dad would be a public school teacher, graduate from high school and college at Lamar University in Beaumont. He would become a public school teacher, and then he told me to value education as well. So eventually, after working on Barack Obama's presidential campaign, I became a teacher, and that's what brought me to Dallas. And I taught in DISD. Then I went to Harvard. I got my master's in education policy and management. I came back to DISD, worked in the administration, and then at the age of 27, seat opened up on the school board. I said, this is my city. I love this city. I'm going to live in this city for the rest of my life. And I ran for the school board, and I've been on there ever since. And then I started coming over here.
You started coming over here. You've been on here about 2-3 times now.
That's right. Yeah. That's my third time.
Mm-hmm. Harvard education.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to be running for Congress, man.
You know what? We live right now in a hyper-partisan world, right? It's hard to get stuff done at the federal government because of how partisan you got to be. You can't work across the aisle. It's hard to get stuff done at the state government because of how parties are so influential and how you got to fight against the other party. The only place big things can get done anymore, I'm convinced, is at the city level. We live in an era of city-states, and so I'm convinced that in the 9th largest city in this nation, we can put bold policies and programs in place to show not just the state of Texas or the nation, the globe, what we can do to improve the lives of everyday citizens.
Now, bold policies such as what?
I got a whole bunch. And I'll start by saying, why would I even want to run for mayor? You just talked about being on the school board. what I realized in DISD, as we have transformed it into one of the best public school districts in the nation, and I'll give you the data around that if you need me to give it to you, but I'm saying the improvement we made in DISD can only get us so far. If we don't address things like access to affordable housing, if we don't do things like make sure that we limit our homeless population, make sure that we give people access to jobs and good wages, but more importantly, make sure people have access to be able to create their own jobs, their own businesses. I'm tired of our people having to settle for just getting another job. We need to own those jobs and own those businesses. Better public transportation, making sure that the DART system in Dallas works for the people of Dallas. Ending child poverty, that's a massive thing. We got the third largest child poverty rate of cities 1 million plus. These are the issues that rest at City Hall or through City Hall, and I want to lend my services and my skills and my 10 years that I've been cutting my teeth in DISD to the city to take big change.
Now, the homeless situation,
That's right.
how are we going to solve that?
With a lot of different things that we need to do. One of the first things is we need to address things like child homelessness. Do you know that there are thousands of kids in Dallas right now that are unaccompanied, they're homeless, going from couch to couch, but they still show up to DISD to get that education, because then, just like my grandmother, when you don't have a lot and somebody tells you education is the thing that's going to get you out of poverty and make you something, you cling to that hope. So in DISD, what we've done is expanded the drop-in centers all across our city. And also we've done innovative things like After 8 to Educate, where we took one of our old facilities that wasn't being used and we turned it into a youth homeless shelter. So now kids are going to have the opportunity to have a roof over their head while they finish DISD. Now, what would that mean to the city? There are facilities all across our city that are owned by DISD, that are owned by the county, that are owned by City Hall. We need to be creative and create interjurisdictional partnerships to allow for some of these facilities to be these drop-in centers, so that the spillover that happened from the shelters, when you can't get into the shelter, you got nowhere else to go. So we need to be creative about the way that we use our facilities. But that's not the totality of it, Kamish. Why would someone even become homeless? What are the issues that are generating homelessness? Because if we don't solve that, we're always going to have a homeless problem. Access to wages. We have a living wage crisis right now in our city. People that work one job and are making minimum wage can't do it, so they got to work 2 jobs or 3 jobs. We need to raise wages in this city. In DISD, I led the effort to raise the minimum wage from the federal minimum now to almost $12 an hour.
Now hold on a minute. The city of Dallas can raise the minimum wage.
The city of Dallas can raise the minimum wage. They can raise the wage for people that work in the city. Number one, right? Number two, there's a whole bunch of people that want contracts from the city of Dallas. So we need to have thoughtful conversations from a city standpoint with those individuals and those entities to say, are you going to take care of your workers? And in DISD, we already raised the wage for 800 hourly employees, but more importantly, we're now beginning to think about how do we talk to these contractors, these businesses that want to partner with the city, with DISD, and make sure that they're taking care of their workers, because a lot of their workers, where do they send their kids? To school.
What would the minimum wage be?
Right now at Dallas ISD, it's a little more than $12 an hour. We need to go further than that. There's a calculator right now called the MIT Living Wage Calculator, and if you go to that, Google MIT Living Wage Calculator, you can find out what the living wage is for a single adult, for an adult that's got kids, or families. And you go type that in, that's what our number is.
Okay, let me stop you for a minute, because people out there that are listening right now, we're talking about the living minimum wage, and we're talking about the minimum wage. Most people are familiar with the minimum wage, which means basically, that's the lowest amount of money that they can go ahead and pay you. What is a living minimum wage?
Well, again, it depends on who you are and what your circumstances are. If you go and plug it in, the last time that I checked, the living wage for a single adult with no kids, which is typically not who we're talking about, but single person, no kids, I think it was somewhere around the lines of like $18, $19. So when you talk about there's been a big push across the nation for $15 minimum wage, right? Let's have a conversation about that as a starting number, but we have to be realistic about what it actually costs to live in Dallas.
So a living minimum wage basically means that this is what it would take for someone to actually live on.
That's exactly right.
Not a minimum wage, which is this is what I'm gonna pay you,
That's
which
right.
means I'm gonna pay you this amount of money. That's the minimum I'm gonna pay you. But a living wage gives you something that you can live off.
What type of wage can we pay you to make sure that you aren't struggling at the end of the month to figure out how am I going to pay, AT&T? How am I going to pay for the groceries? How am I going to pay to keep the lights on? How am I going to make rent? And then maybe, if I have a couple bucks left, take my kid to go see a movie. Take my kid to go see the Mavericks play. Right now, there are families they're not afforded the opportunity to do any of that because they're trying to figure out how do I not get evicted next month. That can't happen in this city moving forward. We need to have a mayor who recognizes it, who's been on the ground working with the community to hear these issues, and then has a whole set of ideas moving forward to take care of our people, man.
Have we ever had one before? A mayor like that?
I mean, I think that we've had mayors in the past who recognize the symptoms that are causing these things, but for me, as I think about the future of this city, it's going to take a mayor who's equipped to be able to turn that council into a council that works together around a bold agenda that's set by the mayor. That's one of the few powers the mayor actually has, is to set the council agenda and then make that agenda a people-powered agenda, but also work with businesses. Our business community in this city, they want to work on these issues, but they need to have a mayor who's going to be able to work with them and make them good corporate citizens as well. There's a lot of people out there that like to bash the business community. I'm not one of them, but I am one that's going to hold them accountable to making sure that they support the growth of this community. And I think in working in DISD, I've been able to build relationships with those business community members to do this at the city level as well.
Let's talk about gentrification in neighborhoods and everything. We'd spoken earlier interview about gentrification. What is your feel on that?
Yeah, gentrification is a massive issue, but let's be nuanced about gentrification. The idea of gentrification ultimately is you bring development and potentially prosperity to a community. There are elements of gentrification that can be good things for communities, but unfortunately in the past, we have not had the policies in place to allow for the benefits of gentrification to manifest themselves. So what ends up happening? We talk about gentrification the way that we know it, that our communities know it. You get one store, and then another store, and then another apartment, and then 5 years later, Granny's out of the house. She's somewhere else. And right now, she's living in DeSoto, she's living in Duncanville, or Lancaster, or over in Grand Prairie. We have to have, based on this new housing policy, a mayor who's going to come in with bold ideas to make sure that our communities don't get kicked out and can benefit from this development. Now, how do we do that? Things like neighborhood change index, things like community bargaining agreements, things like tax abatements.
Okay, hold on.
I can go on and on.
But I understand. But keep in mind that there are some people out there who using big, fancy, hard words. Tax abatements. And then you use some other words.
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way, Kamesh. Hey, if you knew that your community was going to be gentrified in 5 years, would you want somebody to do something about that today? Most people would answer, yes. I don't want to be. If I know that gentrification is coming my way, I want to be able to benefit from it and not have to worry about whether I'm getting kicked out. There's a policy called the Neighborhood Change Index.
Okay, that was one of the phrases used.
Other cities around the nation are putting these policies like that in place. And you know what it does? It says, Kamish, in 5 years, your community is going to gentrify. You need to know that today. And we're going to do another policy, something called a community bargaining agreement. So I need you, I need your neighborhood association leader, and I need a few of the other community leaders to come to the table at the city with business and sit down and say, how do we ensure that that development benefits their bottom line and benefits you so that you don't get kicked out? After the community bargaining agreement, then we have other things like creating a housing trust fund that would allow us the opportunity to build up monies, whether it's from private philanthropy or from bond allocations, and then that housing trust fund can help us do things like improve people's homes that live in the community right now, help build new homes, and lock in those homes at a particular price. And then other things like a land trust, which is basically community coming together to purchase lots that then lock in home prices so that people that don't have homes right now and can't afford them can get that home, can raise equity, and then once they hit a particular amount of monies that they save because of their home, they can go afford to go buy another home somewhere else as well. These are the types of things that I'm talking about, that I'm thinking about, and that the people that I'm talking to on this campaign want to see happen with their next mayor of Dallas.
You mentioned earlier about setting the agenda, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that. But before we go into that, the mayor's past agenda was the pension. Has that been solved?
It hasn't been solved completely. I think that the mayor, I think that the city attorney, I think that our state legislators down in Austin did a good job of getting us to the point where we are not in an existential, make or break crisis. But whoever is going to be on that pension review, the pension board, that's city appointed, they've got to maintain integrity, scrutiny, and they got to make sure that they're watching this thing like a hawk. Because if we don't, it could get out of control, and then we're back to square one again, where we're looking at fiscal insolvency or bankruptcy for this city. And nobody wants that. It doesn't help our brand, it doesn't help our people. We need to make sure that we continue to keep eyes on it.
I want to talk to you about the Citizens Police Review Board. I would like to get your opinion on that, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at some of the questions or the comments that are coming through as well. So let's talk about the
So the review board itself is, I think, a good institution, because what it allows us to do is it allows common citizens to be able to monitor what's happening from a police department standpoint. And when we have issues that arise, that bubble up, that need that outside objectivity to be able to look at what's happening and the decisions that the police department is making or has made, that's a good thing. And we need to make sure that they have the tools necessary to be able to do that. At the same time, I understand why some in the police department may have some questions about it, because these are trained professionals that go through the process of dedicating their life to trying to do their job. But if you ask your beat cop, they'll tell you, look, we know that there's some people within the ranks that probably shouldn't be beat cops. They probably shouldn't be in the department. And maybe these are some of the people that ultimately end up making mistakes that would then get us to the position that we would have to have a police review commission. So there are good, hard-working police officers, public safety officers that want to make sure that their profession remains the best profession that it can possibly be. And I think the review board and the commission can do a good job of making sure that we're holding our police department accountable.
Now, we have a Citizens Police Review Board now,
Yep.
but it doesn't have any subpoena power.
That's right.
So that means essentially that they're cheaters.
Yeah, they need teeth. They need teeth. If they have teeth, I think it gives us the opportunity as a city, and this is going to sound maybe counterintuitive to some, if they have teeth, that helps us bring our community together. Because you know what teeth leads to in a situation like this, Commissioner? Trust. Trust. One of the greatest things that Chief Brown did was institute the idea of community policing. Being on the school board, in the community, I go to neighborhood association meetings all the time. And some of the most beautiful scenes are these crime watch meetings where community members and police officers are in the same room, having coffee, drinking orange juice, talking about the safety of the community. We need to make sure that our next mayor is as invested in keeping us down the path of community policing, because it does a good job building trust amongst our community members and our law enforcement.
All right, speaking of building trust, I trust that the people are still tuning in and listening in and also making comments. So let me go ahead and read some of the comments, and I will start from the bottom and work my way up. Judge Teresa Hawthorne has joined us as well, and she says she has a compliment for you. She said you have great presence, and what do you think is the most important issue for Dallas at this time?
Yeah. So I think that the three most important issues for Dallas at this time, because the way I think about this, they all work together, is education, housing, and access to jobs and access to the economy. And it means the ability to be able to own your own businesses as well, working with our business community. Those would be the three major things. But look, if we don't address some of these other systemic issues like poverty, like lack of access to public transportation that allows people to get to where they need to get themselves out of poverty, if that may be the case. If we don't address those issues as well, then, what is the mayor's position for? LBJ used to say something, when he'd have to make hard decisions, people say, well, you sure you want to do that? Around the Civil Rights Act was the first time that he said this. He said, you sure you want to do something? This is going to be real divisive. And LBJ said, why did I run for the presidency if I wasn't going to use the power? Why am I running for mayor if I'm not going to take bold steps and use that power to then ultimately impact the people of Dallas? So those first three are the issues, the major issues I'd like to begin to tackle.
Okay. Sydney Walker, Inside Texas Politics. She said she heard you this morning. Where were you at this morning?
I spoke at Chorizo Menudo over on Jefferson Boulevard with Domingo Garcia at the Hudak.
Okay, all right, okay. And she said you made some good points this morning. What did you say?
I basically was saying about the same stuff that I'm saying right now, talking a little bit about my background, my values, how it connected to my work in DISD, a vision for what we need to do for this city moving forward. And I think it resonated with people because, I'm not a newcomer, Kamish. People know me. They know my track record. They know that I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but I've also gotten a lot of really great things done. And in the areas where I need to improve, I'm willing to try to do that. So I think this is a people-powered movement, and I'm excited about it.
Now, you opened yourself up on that one, man. You said you made mistakes. Which mistakes you made?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, when you're 27 years old and you get on the school board.
Oh, you want to use that one, huh?
Yeah,
I was 27. I was young.
No, man. No, when you get on the school board, the age that I did, you come in and you got all these bright ideas. You think you know it all. And you step up on that dais, and it's like, I don't.
So you was 27 years old?
That's right. 27, the youngest school board member ever elected to the school board. But I learned real quick because 6 months later, I built relationships with my colleagues. I showed that I could figure out how to, navigate the system, and they made me the board president. So I was the youngest school board president in the history of DISD.
How old are you now?
I'm 32 going on 45.
32 going on 45.
That's why I had to cut all the hair off, man.
Yeah, why'd you cut all your hair off, man?
This is what it looks like after 6 years on the school board.
No. I mean, hey, look here. They look good though, man.
I mean, I had a good head of hair, but I'm trying something different.
Now, how's your family doing?
My family's doing well. To God be the glory, my friend. And I appreciate you checking up on us.
I always do.
You do, man. For those
I'm gonna let you guys know on that because when I call you and check on you, I call you and check on you with nothing political.
That's right, man.
I just say, how's everything going?
That's right.
Yeah.
For those that didn't follow the story, I'll keep it real brief. But my daughter, my wife and I, we had our first daughter on February 22nd, 2018, only child, and almost immediately we realized that she had a heart defect. And we tried to do something about that in the ICU, and it went wrong. And so my baby survived 63 minutes of CPR on her 5th day of life. She survived being placed on life support with surgery. And then she survived 16 days of life support, 1 open heart surgery for 10 hours to try to fix her old heart. And when that didn't work, another 10-hour open heart surgery to have a heart transplant. She survived 3 strokes and seizures. But God is great. And on February 22nd, 2019, Olivia's going to turn 1 year old. She's crawling. She's saying mama. Unfortunately, she didn't learn dada yet. Saying mama. She's, and every doctor says she's a miracle child.
See?
This is it.
To God be the glory.
Be the glory.
All right, so you really got a lot to live for, a lot to campaign for. This seems to be much more than just, the campaign seems to be much more than just running for mayor.
This is about the future of our city. It's about my daughter's future. It's about making sure we don't forget the past. We live in a segregated city still to this day. And we need to be honest about the history of the city. Whether it was racial exclusionary zoning, block busting, federal redlining, the way that highways were created to carve up communities and to hyper-concentrate communities.
Or destroy communities.
Destroy communities.
Like South Boulevard,
Park Road,
Right.
Mill City,
Right.
the Bottoms, Fraser Courts, Ledbetter, La Bajada, Los Altos, Glendale, University Hills, Singing
And you
Hills.
just think about Glendale. Where Glendale Park is at, it's
Yep.
like one side of the park, and then it's the other side of the park. And there's basically Loop 12 that goes right through it.
And kids got to cross that.
And nobody, you know, when I was a kid coming up, it was like, you know, you drive down Loop 12, and our family was like, you know, block to block traffic. It's like there's one side of the park, and there's another side of the park. I thought that was just natural until I went into the north side of town, and I didn't see no freeways going through the parks on the other side.
It's a storied history, and you know that history very well. I mean, you document some of that history. But if you think about Glendale, that's a perfect example of how those historic decisions carved up communities and what our next mayor needs to focus on moving forward. That is a beautiful park, and it's a beautiful community. You know, I think about the work Casey Thomas is doing down there, the work Taylor Coynes with 4 Oak Cliff is doing down there. That Glendale Park needs to be a new park. The next bond that comes up, and the mayor will have the opportunity to get that bond out there, we need to make Glendale Park a world-class park. Now, I don't know what we can do about the road going through, but you know what we could do to get around that? Have a beautiful connector, a beautiful safe bridge to connect that park together. A world-class bridge to connect that park together to make sure that we are taking care of our people. Those are the types of things our mayor needs to be cognizant of, know the history of, and then have a bold plan in place to make sure that we address those inequities.
When you think about these ideas, you got them from Oxford College. Was there a school of government or something like that?
No, man, none of that. I didn't learn. That's one of the other problems, is that we don't teach these things in school. I had to learn this through the community. I had people that walked me through Glendale, people that walked me through Mill City, and said, here's how it happened. And then I would go and find the books, and I would teach myself a book, The Color of Law. It's a great book. It talks about some of this stuff. Freedom is Not Enough. It's another book that talks about this. There's a book called When Affirmative Action Was White. It talks about these things. And so when you start to take that and then you see it through the eyes of the community, it makes a whole bunch of sense. And I think that it's going to take someone who has the ability not just to understand the history, but build coalitions to address these systemic inequities. And I've been doing this in DISD. And I co-wrote the Racial Socioeconomic Inequity Resolution with Joyce Foreman to call out these historic decisions. And then we wrote the Racial Equity Policy, which is the first of its kind in DISD. There are not many districts that are doing this. And then we created the Racial Equity Department, and now that department has about $16 million. And what does that then produce? Just 2 weeks ago, DISD voted, a historic vote, to make African American Studies a course in DISD, and our next step is to mandate that course. So to graduate from DISD, you have to take African American Studies so that everybody, not just our African American boys and girls, everyone sees the value of the history of the African American community and their true story. And it can be localized as well.
Okay, now let me ask you this. If you do that, wouldn't you have to do that for Hispanics as well?
Probably so. And we intend on building the policies necessary and the curriculum necessary to do that as well.
And now, after you do that, you have to do it for Asians as well.
We start thinking about it. How many people's stories have we not told in the past that have made America what it is today? Separate and aside.
Great again?
Say it again?
We made America great again?
It's always been great, Kamish.
So it's not, so you don't believe in making America great again?
I know, I believe in making sure that we know what makes this country great to begin with.
Okay.
And unfortunately, when I was an 8th grade social studies teacher, I had to teach people about the Founding Fathers.
Right.
I had to teach people about the Constitution. I had to teach people about, Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. And they're all great people. And those are all great documents. But whose story are we not telling? We need to tell the full story of our country. And then the other thing, I stopped the practice of out-of-school suspension for pre-K through 5th grade kids. Because you know what?
Right, so you're going to suspend the kid that's basically 8 years old and tell them to go home, right?
They were in DISD. I pulled data because I was in the community.
For someone probably who's a working class person.
Our pre-K through 5th grade kids in 2015, we out-of-school suspended 6,600 kids. Those are 3 to 10-year-olds. And in DISD at the time, it was about 158,000 kids. 72% were Latino. Only 10% of the 158,000 kids were pre-K through 5th grade black boys. But of the 6,600 out-of-school suspensions for pre-K through 5th grade, 65% were black boys. We were criminalizing kids in our public schools before they ever had the chance to dream anything different. And you know where they ended up? In the school-to-prison pipeline. So I stopped the practice of that. And now, except in violent offenses, because you gotta know, you can't punch another kid. You can't punch a teacher. There are consequences to that. But instead of kicking them out, now we have additional resources like social emotional learning, positive behavior intervention systems, restorative practices, and we take the kid out of the classroom, but we work to build their character back up so that we're not criminalizing them and showing them they actually have potential if they can think about the way they're making decisions. But what we did before that, and by the way, now this is state law. I work with Representative Giddings and Eric Johnson, and it's law across the state. But what we did before, we kicked the kids out. They go home, and then they get caught up in this juvenile curfew stuff, and then they get caught up in the system. And we were asking 3 to 10-year-olds to go home and change their outlook on life, become a different human being in 3 days, and then come back. That's unreasonable. And now it doesn't happen anymore.
What other things did you do in DISD? Then we'll go to a close.
I wrote the first pre-K policy in the history of the district. Now we got 17,000 kids in DISD that are getting pre-K that weren't getting it before. And that has been a massive effort, because if you can get pre-K, you're more likely to be kindergarten ready, and then you can read by 3rd grade, and then your chances of success moving forward are a lot better. We're paying teachers more in DISD. We're professionally developing differently, and we're making sure they are getting results for our kids. And so now that we know who our best educators are, we can go place them in the schools that need them the most. And that's something called the ACE program. And when we get into these schools that are ACE programs, these are some of the toughest schools. But now they're all off of the state's improvement required list. And they're some of them are outperforming Highland Park schools. So don't tell me that our kids in DISD, our African American or Hispanic students can't learn. They can, and they can outcompete people. So we've done a whole bunch of things, Commission. At the end of the day, rather than sit here and talk to you about all my laurels,
go forward.
That's it, man. Our city has an opportunity to get it right, and I want to take this leadership capacity and do it at the city of New York.
When is the election?
May the 4th.
May the 4th. So let's go with the closing and tell us why. I'm gonna ask you like I asked the other guy that was in before you. Why should I vote for you?
The future of the city rests on who sits at that mayor's seat. It's important that we have somebody that understands our community, that's willing to fight for our community, who has already proven that they have done that has the experience getting results in municipal politics at the municipal level, in a system where the mayor sets the agenda. They need to know how to do that. Sets committee assignments. They need to know how to do that. Works with the city manager, because you don't run the city as a mayor. The city manager does it. Works with the city manager to get things done for our city. I am the only candidate in this race who's got the experience getting results and working to bring people together. Our council is divided right now. We need a fresh approach, a new leader to come into that council who's gotten results at the municipal level, and I believe I'm that person, and it's my hope that I can earn everybody's vote in Dallas on May 4th. You can go to www.miguelformayor.com to learn more about it. Hit us up on Instagram at Miguel for Mayor, on Facebook at Miguel for Dallas, and on Twitter as well at Miguel for Dallas.
Okay. Appreciate it again.
Thank you.
Commission Radio Show. Hey, we had an exciting weekend, and as you know, we will be back next weekend. But before we let you go, we want you to have a nice and enjoyable Super Bowl Sunday weekend, and we will see you guys back next week. All right?
If you're ready for some home-style cooking, some real Cajun food, you need to visit Thibodeau's Cajun Cooking, 107 North Cedar Ridge in Duncanville, Texas. Some of the best Cajun food in town. They also have live music as well. Great spot to bring your friends and your family. Thibodeau's Cajun Cooking.